Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, really excited about today's show. Mike Kronenberg joins us. Mike is a friend that I have met through social media. He is the associate editor of Ringside Seat, one of my favorite boxing magazines, and also does a lot of work for Two Morrows. He designs covers for things like Back Issue and Alter Ego and the like. He also has done the Batcave Companion. In fact, 10 years ago, he published the Batcave Companion with Two Morrows. He and Mike Urey looking at Batman stories of the 60s and 70s and the creators of the 60s and 70s. We talked to Mike about that last year, but it comes up again this year as we talk to him, and also get a little more into a lot of other pop culture jobs that Mike has. He works for Noir City, Eddie Muller's organization that puts on incredible film festivals celebrating the great black and white noir films, and also makes Noir City magazine. And we also talk about his work on the EC collections, lots of other things, his love of old horror movies, and we get into a little bit about Bela Lugosi, and I look forward to talking to an author that Mike has worked with who is examining Bela Lugosi's Monogram 9, the 9 films he made for Monogram Films, and pretty neat. Interesting part of Lugosi's career. I mean, you know, we all know, unfortunately, his downfall, his years with Ed Wood, but he was making movies in the 40s. He also did Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein for Universal, but did a lot of work with Monogram, and in some cases, really brilliant stuff on a shoestring budget. So, some of the amazing conversation categories we talk about with Mike Kronenberg on today's Word Balloon. All brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. I appreciate it. Everyone, subscribe to Word Balloon, and we appreciate the revenue here at wordballoon.com from Patreon. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free, but if you want to help the cause out, you enjoy what you hear here on Word Balloon, try to give you at least, 6 to 10 hours a month of great comic book conversation, and this month of May is going to be no different. But if you want to help the cause, subscribe to Word Balloon via Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Now, Word Balloon has been sponsored by Aftershock the last few months. We've been presenting some great conversations with Aftershock creators. We just spoke to Stephanie Phillips and about her book Descendant. This Saturday is Free Comic Book Day, and Aftershock is right there on the front lines of Free Comic Book Day with a great one, an Animosity issue from Marguerite Bennett. Cool stuff. You'll want to pick that up, and it's a good entry point to check out some of the other great books that Aftershock provides. Descendant came out today, Wednesday, May 1st, but there's a ton of other great product from people like Tim Seeley and Cullen Bunn and Garth Ennis and Frank Thierry. Wonderful writers, wonderful artists as well, and things like The Art of Jim Starlin. Of course, Endgame and Avengers is on our mind. Revisit a lot of great Jim Starlin art in that wonderful book from Aftershock Comics. Check it out. They are calling 2019 the year of living dangerously. They got a lot of great, interesting titles coming up this year. You can find out more about them if you go to their website. You'll find preview art, full story descriptions, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Mike Kronenberg. We're talking Batman, EC Comics, lots of great creators, and horror movies and noir films. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Mike Kronenberg on today's Word Balloon. Mike Kronenberg, welcome back to Word Balloon. It's great to talk to you again, man. It's been almost a year.
Oh, thanks for having me on, John. It's great. Your podcast is my favorite.
You're very kind. You make a couple great magazines that I love. In addition to, I appreciated your encouragement to start the Big Bout podcast once again. And you and Doug Fisher were like my guys that are just like, all right, I respect both of you in terms of your boxing knowledge. I'm like, am I nuts? Could I do this? And you're both like, yeah, do it. And it's like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. I hope everybody subscribes, to your boxing podcast, because it's great, and you've got all that great old stuff to contribute too.
Yeah, it was nice, man. It was a good foundation of 16 years of covering the sport, and luckily I hung on to some great interviews. I wish I hung on to my Muhammad Ali interview. That's my great regret. 1990.
That would have been great.
He was fantastic. It was right before Foreman fought Holyfield. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and we were at an ESPN card, and Harold Brazier, the former junior welterweight great, was the main event, and it was in South Bend. It was in Notre Dame country, and Fred Burns was the promoter. He's like, Ali's coming. I'm like, yeah, right. He goes, no, Berrien Springs, Michigan is only like 40 minutes away. He goes, he really is coming. He goes, I'll get you time with him, because I was writing for Boxing Illustrated at the time. And Ali came, and Howard Bingham was with him, the photographer.
Right.
And two of his daughters. Friend. And two of his daughters. I couldn't tell you. I don't believe it was Layla. I don't believe Layla was one of them. But two of his young daughters were with him. They were like definitely 12 to 15, somewhere in that range. And it was amazing. He was like the queen at Wimbledon. He came in the middle of the card, and there was some 4-rounder going on. And literally, like, the round ended, and everyone saw that Ali was walking in, and everybody just stood up and just politely applauded. And it was like I said, literally like a queen at Wimbledon, kind of respectful applause.
Yeah.
And everybody stood up, and when Ali sat down, we all sat down. It was terrific. No, he was great. I got to talk to him for about 3 minutes, and he had good analysis about Foreman. He was kind of stammering a bit with his Parkinson's syndrome, but you understood him. And his mind was fine. I mean, and I'm really glad that was expressed so well up until his passing, in terms of, I know it looks like, there might be more, for lack of a better word, brain damage than we realize. But the sad truth was, his mind was fine. He was just kind of trapped in this body. And he was great. No, and he was really kind. And I had to finally, because I had been doing professional radio interviews for years, I'm like, champ, can you just say in my micro cassette, "Hi, John, this is Muhammad Ali," because nobody's going to believe I'm talking to you. And he laughed, and he said, "Hello, John, this is Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time. What's happening, baby?" And I laugh, and he claps me on the back, and I'm like, dude, that was amazing. Thank you. And he was great. No, I'm like, oh my God, I met one of my heroes. It's like meeting Superman.
Wasn't 1990 around the time, I think, that he was part of that NBC broadcast where they did the greatest fights?
Yes.
And the only time he came on, if I remember correctly, was they showed Ali Frazier 1.
Yep.
And they had Frazier on. They weren't together. They had Frazier on, and they had Ali on. Yep. And I thought Ali was really good. He was pretty damn humble, I thought. He spoke about Frazier and how Frazier was phenomenal that night. Sure. I don't even know anybody could have beaten Joe Frazier that night.
I said the same thing, man. I said this. That one fight, that Joe Frazier at that moment, put him against any heavyweight champion, and it's going to be an incredible fight, because he never took a backward step. He just kept going forward and swinging.
Yeah, nobody was going to beat Joe Frazier that night. And to me, I still think, for me, that fight, just for personally, it's the greatest sports spectacle ever, even though I was too young for it. But what I've read about it and seen about it, it just was just sports spectacles. It's just, there's nothing like that anymore. You don't ever see anything like that.
I was 5 or 6, because that was 70, I want to say, or 71?
It was 71. It was 71.
Okay, and it was March of 71, so I would have been 5. And we knew it in my house. And my dad, I didn't see the closed circuit, but I remember us getting the newspaper the next day, because it was a Monday night. That's when the fight was. And or Tuesday morning, and it's like, Dad, who won? He's like, Frazier won. And we were a Frazier house. I won't deny it. But then I got to know, I never got to interview Frazier. Frazier is the only heavyweight of the 70s that I never had a chance to have any sort of conversation with. Everybody else, George many times, Ken Norton when his book came out, Ali a couple times, and Larry Holmes a couple times. But anyway, I really obviously appreciated Ali's story. And it was an incredible fight, and it was a huge event,
it lived up to all the hype. It lived up to the hype.
And the HBO special they made of the first fight is incredible. I
don't think I've seen that.
It's HBO, on YouTube. You can find it.
I'll have to look for it.
Yeah, it's amazing. But No, Ollie was tremendous. He was wonderful and absolutely again, it was like meeting Superman for real.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, and we're going to get into comic book conversations because Mike, along with your strong suits of boxing, you're a hell of a comic book man. You've been and now real fast not real fast because I don't want to give her short shrift. But your wife is a DC colorist or was?
She was. Yeah, she worked. She did. She worked on Catwoman with Paul Gulacy and Ed Brubaker.
Wow, that's great. That's amazing. I love both Darwin and Gulacy's Brubaker runs. I thought that, obviously Ed on Selena's run was just incredible, and I loved
it was great.
Slam Bradley. I'm such a Slam Bradley fan, of course.
Well, and what was really cool was when Paul took over, and he decided to make Slam Bradley Robert Mitchum.
Yeah.
So he looks like Robert Mitchum.
It's true.
And when my wife would get the scans, and I was looking at it, and I was good friends with Paul anyways, and he kind of told me that this was going to happen, and I saw those first pages come in, and I'm seeing Slam Bradley, and I was like, oh, damn, this is great. Perfect. Slam Bradley, Robert Mitchum, I thought that was perfect, because, Paul did that a lot back with Master of Kung Fu, and when I tried to emphasize that, or call a lot of attention to that, because that was in my book on Gulacy, because when I was a kid and I read Master of Kung Fu, the reason I got into Master of Kung Fu, because someone told me at the newsstand, a friend, he said, you ought to get this. He said, because the guy who draws this, one of the characters is Marlon Brando and another character is Sean Connery. And I was like, really? So I opened it up and it's like, holy shit. Yeah. That's Marlon Brando. So that's how I became a Gulacy and a Master of Kung Fu fan, was because he was drawing. And then, of course, Marlene Dietrich also, and David Niven, too.
Groucho Marx, Wise cab driver. You're
right.
No, absolutely, man. And it's funny because all that was happening at Marvel. Meanwhile, DC, they do the Superman Ali cover. And, half the celebrities they initially put into the book say no. Right. Like John Wayne. It's like, all right, give him a mustache. Give him blonde hair or something. Change it.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of them turned it down. But yeah, no. And then Paul did the, what was it, Bizarre Adventures, which was one of the black and white Marvel magazines. And he did a Black Widow story, and he put Michael Caine and Humphrey Bogart in it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I got to find that. That's wonderful, man. Yeah, The Art of Paul Gulacy, the Vanguard publishing book. What was your title on the book, Mike?
Spies, Vixens, and Masters of Kung Fu.
That's awesome. But what was your title as on the project? Were you editor? Were you graphic designer?
I was the editor, graphic designer.
Everything.
I wrote it, I guess. I mean, but what it really was is more of like an oral history of Paul's work.
Yeah.
So basically, it's Paul talking about his work. Also spoke to Steve Rude, who was good friends with Paul and still is.
Sure.
I think Steve was influenced a lot by Paul. I'm trying to think of who else. And of course, Jim Steranko also, he wrote the afterword for the book.
That's excellent. Those are three of my favorite people. Jim hasn't been on the show yet, but I'm hopeful. And Steve's a great guy. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was when he said, "Hey, I like what you do. Can I come on?" I'm like, "Can you come on? You're Steve Rude. Of course you can come." Are you kidding me?
He's great. Did you see his variant cover for Detective Comics 1000?
Yes.
Wow,
good Lord.
God, that was great.
Yeah, man. No, and he was going to do Superman work with Brian, and it just didn't work out, and that's a shame because I would have loved to have seen him back on Superman again. In fact, it made me go back and grab when he did that wonderful Superman versus the Hulk crossover.
Yeah,
oh my God, it really was like
that's great. I love that.
Yeah, him doing his Kirby best, and yeah, I mean it totally looked like 63 Superman and 63 Hulk getting together. It was amazing. So
what I love about Steve Rude's work on Batman and Superman is that of course his Batman is, no matter what costume he has in it, he always looks like, to me, the 1939 Batman, which is one of my favorite Batmans.
Sure.
That 1939, that first year of the character where he's solo before Robin.
Yeah.
I think that stuff still holds up in my opinion. It's very pulp. It's very noir. So very near and dear to me is that first year. So Steve always seems to like exude that Batman is exuded into his Batman, that 39 Batman. And then of course Superman is the Fleischer cartoons. I look at his Superman and I see the Fleischer cartoons.
I like that. No, I like that a lot. You mentioned the 39 Batman. I don't know if we ever talked about it. Have we ever talked about when Matt Wagner a couple of years ago adapted those early 39 stories and fleshed them out even more? And
no, those were good. I like those.
And Matt's, and I'll say it again just for the purposes of saying it fresh. I always say the most underappreciated artist-writer of Batman is Matt Wagner, because he gets him to a T. The crossovers with Grendel have always been really interesting, but really anytime Matt writes and draws Batman, it's really, really incredible work.
Yeah, those Batman Grendel team ups were great. I think they were in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did like his Batman and the Monster Man. I think it's
exactly
those were nice, and I like the painted covers that he did were really nice too.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like I said, a big Wagner fan. Well, and we mentioned Galassi, and of course his work on Catwoman, but he and his Moon Knight partner Doug Munch had those wonderful Batman runs as well, right after Moon Knight, right? Wasn't it after they had already
he did,
or not Moon Knight? It was Master of Kung Fu. Shame on me.
Right, Paul did with Munch. He did the Legends of the Dark Knight, the Prey series, which was the Hugo, with Hugo Strange, and Terry Austin inked them, and Terry Austin is maybe my all-time favorite inker.
Sure.
I love Austin's work, and he's also a super nice guy. And he was he was a big contributor to my Batman book. In fact, he came through when Marshall. I was going to interview Marshall, and Marshall Rogers had his heart attack 5 days before we were going to talk.
Wow! And
I had known Marshall when he lived in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and we would hook up every now and then. So that was so sad. That was like the saddest thing about that book. It's the one biggest thing about that book that I look back on and regret that I didn't do that interview earlier, because he's such an important part of Batman's Bronze Age.
Absolutely.
But Terry came through with some great stuff, really personal stuff, behind the scenes stuff about Marshall. So he's a great inker. He's a really nice guy. But back to Prey, that particular arc, that story arc in Legend of the Dark Knight, and there were a lot of great ones in those first several years of that comic book title. That's my favorite. And the way that they kind of redefined Hugo Strange from a professor into this psychiatrist who torments Batman. And I don't have a lot of original art, but I do have 3 pages from that particular story arc, because I think it's so great.
Galassi gifted me a page from those prestige format books that he did about Batman and Ra's al Ghul. And I say Ra's al Ghul, even though it's been pronounced.
My wife colored that.
Oh, that's fantastic! Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like a Batcave scene of him and Alfred talking. And
that was nice. That was Ra's al Ghul Year One. I think it's what that was.
Probably that sounds right. The Paul, but I'm a huge fan of Paul's. I am slowly trying to coax him to come back to Word Balloon. We've had the one conversation, but it was outstanding, and I met him a couple times at a few conventions. And no, he's amazing. He's an incredible talent, and he's a down to earth good guy.
He's the best. He's fantastic.
That's cool. We the Batcave Companion is the Two Morrows book that Mike co-wrote with Michael Urie, correct?
That's right.
And he did the 60s, you did the 70s, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Michael Urie did the 60s. I did the 70s, which just made sense because Michael kind of grew up with the Batman of the 60s
Sure.
and the TV show and that particular time. And then, you know, I kind of started with Neil Adams. I mean, that's what Neil's work is what kind of got me into comics and what became my inspiration to become an artist when I saw his Batman work. So that it just made sense for that. And then I designed the book. I had such a blast doing that book. Not only the research doing it, but also designing it, you know, getting all the art and collecting the art. And this was pretty much a time before all this stuff was online and you could download stuff or high resolution stuff. So basically a lot of things I was having to scan. So I was really able to like enjoy and study and look at all the art and all everything, the covers, and I think we used sketches that had never been seen before, layouts that had never been seen before, and a lot of original art that wasn't available. And now, of course, like if you go to a website like Heritage Auctions, you know, they have so much stuff posted from so many years. But that book was just so much fun to do.
All those Two Morrows books, both the actual softcover books and the magazines that they put out as well. I have a lot of respect for John Morrow's company because they've been doing what I've tried to do with Word Balloon for many more years, and certainly go a lot deeper than what I've been able to do with Word Balloon. And you've got a great relationship with Back Issue, correct?
Right. Yeah. No, I've been working for John Morrow for 13 years now, I think. So I've been doing Back Issue. I don't know how many issues I've done the cover design for, but it's like probably like the last 80 issues or 75 issues I've done the cover for. And, you know, and I've contributed a little bit, like the two of the issues that I'm really, or at least two of the covers that I'm really proud of, that I really enjoyed doing was the 40th anniversary of the Superman movie, that I did a special cover. I designed a special cover for, and that has features Gary Frank, Superman art on the front. And then we just did, and it's actually coming out, I think, next month. It was actually premiered at the Chicago convention. What's the Chicago convention?
C2E2, yeah.
Yeah. John actually had it ready early there, and it actually sold out at the convention. But the Batman 30th anniversary for the movie, the Michael Keaton.
Oh, that's great.
Tim Burton movie. So I did a special cover. I did a special cover for that. And I actually was able to interview Sam Hamm, who's the screenwriter of the movie, because Sam and I have been friends for a while.
Oh, wow.
And he's a big film noir guy. He follows the Film Noir Foundation, and he goes to Noir City. He lives in San Francisco. So
oh my God,
we kind of became friends because he knew about all the work I did for the Film Noir Foundation. So we just had this mutual love of film noir. So when Michael said, I'm doing this issue, and, you know, the only person I can't get in touch with is Sam Hamm. And I said, oh, well, I'm friends with Sam, so I'll see if he's up for an interview. And he is great. He's one of my favorite people I've ever interviewed because he was really interesting and he was really honest about stuff. So if anybody is interested in the Batman, the Tim Burton Batman movie, and wants to find out a bunch of stuff about it, that interview is great. But also, I think they interview Michael Islin and Billy D. Williams, and there's a number of. I think there's also a story in the issue about the Denny O'Neil, Jerry Ordway adaptation that DC did.
Absolutely, they're putting out a new hardcover. I
just read that. I can't wait for that.
Jerry was tweeting about that. I'm going to have Jerry back and also Denny back to talk about that stuff. Man, I'll tell you, and I know you feel the same way because you got to interview a lot of these great creators for the Batcave Companion. There's something about these men that got a chance to work on Batman, and we talked about some of them in our previous conversation. I always feel, though, from a writer standpoint, Steve Englehart doesn't get the due, for example, that Marshall did. Marshall Rogers is a great collaborator, and certainly I get it because Marshall obviously brought a new look to Batman that was different from what Neil had been doing and Don Newton and some of the other, even Gene Colan, I know, who was around that same time or maybe afterwards. But as I always say, as beautiful as the art is, there's got to be a good foundation of an actual story. And much like J.H. Williams and Greg Rucka on Batwoman, I think that's the kind of relationship Englehart and Rogers had, certainly with the Laughing Fish story and the subsequent sequels.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, well, I loved Steve Englehart's work going way back, to his Marvel days.
Absolutely,
because when he was Captain America, he was doing Captain America, he was doing the Avengers, and he was doing Doctor Strange when I was a kid.
All of that.
Those all great stuff. And when I had heard, and I was 10, 11 years old, when I heard that he was going over to DC and he was going to do Batman, and Batman was my favorite character, I mean, I flipped out. I thought that was great. So Steve Englehart is one of the great comic book writers.
No question.
And of course, he didn't even know, he had written all those scripts. And then he went off to, I think he went off to Europe to write his novel. And he didn't even know who was going to draw this stuff. I think initially he knew that Walt Simonson was going to work on it, but he didn't even know that Walt Simonson was only going to do breakdowns of those first 2 issues with Dr. Phosphorus, and Alan Milgram had to finish it because I think Simonson couldn't. All he could do was breakdowns because of his schedule. So Alan Milgram ended up having to do the finishes, and it really doesn't look like a Simonson job. And after that was when Rogers and Austin got the job, and there was a lot of. If you read in my book, there was a lot of resistance to Rogers getting that, and Austin too, because they were thought of as like, well, who are these guys? We don't know who they are. They did, they did the backstory for Detective Comics, which was like Hawkman and a couple other characters. I think Elongated Man. It was the Calculator. It was the villain. The Calculator was appearing in these back issues, and then they ended up getting one issue of Batman the Batman story, which was about the final Calculator's, story with like the rest of the Justice League. And if I remember correctly from what Terry Austin was telling me, Joe Orlando hated their work, and he absolutely said there is no way. He despised their work.
Wow.
And he said there's no way they're going to get this detective job. And their benefactor, the guy who came to their rescue and got them the job doing the rest of the Englehart stories, was Vince Scaletta, who was the art director at DC at the time.
I'm nodding. Go on.
And in the end, they got of course, once they did the first issue, and all the mail started coming in to Julie Schwartz's office, and all this positive response. I mean, Comics Journal at the time, and all the comic fandom was going nuts over their work, and rightfully so, because their art was great, but also it was such a bad time at DC Comics during that time.
Yes. They
had no one. I mean, the art was bad. A lot of the writing was bad. Yep. They were having all kinds of problems with sales. And here was, this explosion of creativity from these guys. And the Englehart stories on top of it, I think that was definitely a shot of adrenaline for DC Comics at the time. So,
well, and it was a combination of a beautiful artist and a guy in Englehart that could write real romance in Batman and not have it seem schmaltzy. And, I mean, it really was this wonderful pairing of art and story that elevated the material. And that's why I got really mad. And I think I mentioned this to you on Twitter a couple of days ago when we were talking about the underappreciation of their collaboration, and especially in the sequel, because obviously it was 30 years later that they did Dark Detective 2, and Laughing Fish became known as Dark Detective 1. The story with Boss Thorne, the mayor of Gotham, and Silver St. Cloud, one of Batman's great loves that Tom King, of course, acknowledged in his Batman and Elmer Fudd crossover that was so great. But Silver really
which is by the way, in my opinion, one of the greatest noir comics ever.
No question. Absolutely, man. And deserving of the Eisner. And it's one of those great single Batman issues that stand out in the best possible way. No, I completely agree. But that's the thing, like, and especially in the midst of Tom King's story about Batman and Selina, Silver St. Cloud was right up there as one of Batman's great loves. And,
absolutely.
And I remember reading his second book and a couple online critics mocking him because he had the audacity to use thought balloons, which was so old school in these kid critics' eyes. And also the fact that Batman was saying, "Hang on, honey, I'm coming." And so Batman would never say, "Hey, hang on, honey, I'm coming." It's like, actually, I think the guy who wrote some of the greatest Batman stories ever knows a little bit more about the character than you idiots do, and that's fine. Yeah. It's one thing to say I don't like it. It's another thing for you to claim, well, Batman would never do that, and that kind of drives me nuts with many an online critic. And it's like, yeah, I kind of trust the person that actually has the job as opposed to you.
Well, and the thing about that trio of Englehart, Rogers, and Austin is that, when it was going on in the 70s, I know from Terry, what he was telling me was that Marshall was having a lot of problems meeting his deadlines during, as it was going on, the initial run. And I think Terry doesn't get enough credit for what he did because Terry did a lot of finishes.
Cool.
Marshall could not reach he couldn't finish the job, and he was giving Terry stuff that was like Terry was finishing it.
Wow.
And I don't think Terry gets the credit for that. I think I've seen Steve Englehart talk about that. But Terry was telling me about that, and that when they teamed up again for Dark Detective 2, he had his problems working with Marshall initially. They were friends at first, and then Marshall had some personal problems and during the 70s that he was dealing with, and he became a kind of a difficult person for Terry to deal with. But he said that Marshall had changed so much by the time they did Dark Detective 2 that they became like brothers.
Wow.
They became closer than they were back in the 70s.
Wow.
And they were working together at Continuity when they were doing, the initial detective run. They were both continuity guys. And
Neil Adams and Dick Giordano's studio. For people who don't know Continuity. Go on.
Right. Continuity Studios was Neil Adams' studio where, which is still going on.
Oh, yeah.
He does, advertising work and animation work and all kinds of things like that.
Yes.
But they became very close. And I agree with you about the reception that Dark Detective to God. It was very sad to see because I loved it. I really enjoyed it, and I think there were enough people who really liked it and enjoyed it because they had a nice convention run where they were guests at conventions, and the three of them, kind of toured the country. But the sequel to Dark Detective, which would have been Dark Detective 3,
right?
Englehart finished the script for all 6 issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that was completely done. Marshall penciled the entire first issue, and that was ready to go. And Terry was ready to work on it when Marshall had his heart attack and passed away.
Yeah.
And that's when DC said, no, it was almost the way Terry put it to me was almost like DC was happy to be done with it.
Wow.
They didn't want to do it.
Wow.
And they put it in a drawer and tucked it away. And Terry had said to me, he said, he suggested, and he even asked me at the time when we spoke, he said, can you say something to DC about it? It's like, wouldn't it be great and something that would be nice to remember Marshall by is I inked that first issue, and then the rest of the issues could be drawn by somebody like Paul Gulacy, he said, or even better, Walt Simonson.
That's what I was thinking. Was Walter absolutely
who did the first 2 issues of that run with Dr. Phosphorus in the 70s. He said, and I will ink it, or he said it should be finished, and it just buried it. DC just buried it.
Weird. Well, I know things didn't end well for Steve and DC, and there was definitely some bitterness there. There really kind of was just generally about comics at the end, and I don't know what his state of mind is currently, but my 2 interviews with Steve, yeah, he was pissed. He was really pissed, and then also that, and I think he's right that a lot of what they took from Batman, from Dark Knight, a lot of the Harvey Dent stuff, really did come from that second Dark Detective story. And I mean it's there, and also of course the first
Batman movie, the Keaton film.
Yes,
I think Englehart. I spoke to Steve twice. I interviewed him for Comic Book Market for the Comic Book Price Guide. For the Overstreet Guide.
Yeah.
I did an interview with him about Captain America, and then I interviewed him for the Batcave Companion, and then I spoke to him also about the adult Batman comic that was going to appear in Star Reach that he and Marshall and Terry were going to do, that ended up getting scrapped, which would have been fantastic. But he expressed to me his bitterness towards Warner and DC about stealing from him for the Batman movies and him not getting any credit.
Yeah, me too. He said the same stuff to me, and again, it's, if you know the stories, they're right there on the screen, and it is kind of odd. And also Vicky Vale from that Keaton movie started out to be Silver St. Cloud in the earlier drafts. So did Mike Uslan?
And I think
ever corroborate that with you?
I didn't. I never spoke to him.
Okay,
but it'll be interesting to see. I haven't gotten the issue, the back issue.
Yeah,
it's
the new one.
It's coming out. Back issue number 113. But Sam kind of mentioned that about, and I don't know if he mentioned it in the interview or if he was kind of like we talked about it before the interview, that it was Vicky Vale was Silver St. Cloud before.
Yeah, interesting. No, it's worth revisiting, and certainly I know DC did an amazing Best of Marshall Rogers hardcover a few years ago of a lot of his great Batman work.
But they're coming out with apparently they're coming out with a new one, a new hardcover.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah, I'm talking about, this was just a couple of years ago, and I know they did one with Don Newton, they did one with Gene Colan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those were great. Those were excellent. Now, and it's funny because, again, this is the 80th, obviously, anniversary. Sometimes event books don't work out, and personally, and I'll be interested in your opinion, I appreciated what Kubert and Neil Gaiman were trying to do with Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader, but I gotta say, I don't think it worked out as well as certainly what it was, I think, coming off of in terms of what we did it with Superman. Why not do it with Batman? Certainly what Alan Moore and Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson were able to do.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, the Alan that Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, right?
Yes. Or the Man of Steel, one of the two. Yeah.
Oh man, that was great.
Oh,
that was great. And I agree with you. I agree with you about the Neil Gaiman Batman story, especially that I think that came out at the same time that Grant Morrison was on his run of Batman.
2009.
I have to say that Grant Morrison's run on Batman was fantastic.
I agree.
I loved it.
Absolutely.
I loved it.
Batman R.I.P. and just, that was the one time I got to, on the record, have a conversation with Grant. And he was also doing All-Star Superman at the time, too. And it was great because it was just great timing. I could talk about these two amazing projects that he was doing. And I loved his idea that Batman is literally the same character that started off in Detective 27 in 39 up till that day. And he's like, oh, it all happened to him. It's all, he goes, no, Earth 1, Earth 2. No, it's the same guy. And that's why I love, and I love that he brought back the International Batman. That
all of that. His run on Batman is great, and I'll get back to Tom King's run, which is,
Sure.
in my opinion, you've got what Grant did in Batman, and I don't want to leave anything out, but there's these great runs that Batman has had, which was O'Neill and Adams and Englehart, Rogers and Austin, and what Grant Morrison did, and he did it with several artists, maybe not several, but a few artists.
Sure.
And what Tom is doing is just as great.
Yeah.
I just think what Tom, he understands that character. And if you read the last issue, which was 69, which is the end of his Nightmares series of like where Batman is in this,
torture chair,
having, he's just having these hallucinations. That last issue, and I think it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
He has such an understanding of the character. His writing is so phenomenal, and it has such beautiful subtlety to it. And I don't think I've seen that kind of subtlety and understanding of Bruce Wayne and Batman ever. And I'm not trying to say that his is what he's doing is better than what O'Neill did or what Englehart did. He has an understanding of the character, and it's just amazingly compelling stuff. I'm going to be sad when his run is over. Very sad.
I completely agree, and I also think coming off of Snyder's run, that I'll say it, I kind of felt, especially in the last story, as great as it was, I kind of felt like Snyder was kind of stretching it out a little bit, and my fear was for Tom to follow such an epic run as Scott had on Batman. I'm like, that's a thankless job. This is Brad Meltzer following Kevin Smith on Green Arrow territory, where Brad was willing to put his nuts on the table because nobody knew who Brad was, and thank God Brad shocked everybody, and it's like, oh my God, this is great too, wonderful, and that's the thing. And so that's why I'm like, Tom, you're already killing it at Marvel, and I'm sure you've got other Marvel stories you want to do. And he's like, yeah, but it's Batman. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I said, I'm the Decca Records guy. Okay, I'd stay at Marvel, but you do what you want. And, I go, if for whatever reasons it doesn't work, you come back to Marvel. It's no big deal. I go, I don't think it's a, lose situation in any way. And I go for it. And duh. And also, I just kind of felt that Snyder had already found new wrinkles in Batman with the Court of Owls and a lot of what he added to the mythos, and great experimentation that he and Capullo did from a design standpoint. And God, that incredible Detective Comics run on Black Mirror with Dick Grayson was the best Batman story where Bruce Wayne isn't in the story. And, stuff like that. It was all incredible. I'm like, what is there left to say about Batman? And here comes Tom. And Tom has this incredible story that each part is its own interesting little thing, involving the Suicide Squad, involving Arkham, the tease with Bane, and then the yoink of the carpet when we're building towards this Catwoman Batman wedding, where even we all knew, I think all of us knew, at least I know I did in the back of my mind, and I'm assuming it's not because I'm brilliant. I'm like, something's got to fuck this up. It can't happen. They're not going to let it happen. Something stupid's going to happen. And God, that wonderful page at the end of 50 where it's Bane surrounded by all these people, and what's Thomas Wayne doing there? What's, all these different people? It's like he's just opened a new mystery that we're really just starting to get into. With
like I said, there's a lot of subtlety.
Yeah.
These are all a lot of subtle things he's doing. I liked Scott Snyder's run, the Capullo run. I liked Court of Owls a lot. Dark Mirror is fantastic. I think Dark Mirror is his best work.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But I think what I think Tom has captured that. I mean, the people that I mentioned, the people I mentioned, O'Neill and Englehart and Morrison and Frank Miller's Year One, and Dark Knight Returns, and Tom. I think they all need to be mentioned
that's
together.
interesting, but you don't have Scott in the team picture. I still have Scott in the team picture as well.
I think it was very good, and there are a lot of very good runs. I'm not trying to. I'm just telling you my feeling.
Of course, Mike, it's all good, man. No, first of all, there is
Batman fan.
Yeah, there's no definitive answer here. It's okay, and also
it's not bad. I'm not. Yeah,
and I don't mean to paint you in a negative sense, but yeah, I really thought, and I think a lot of people thought, man, good luck to whoever's going to follow Scott Snyder on this run, because Scott, really did kind of put his, finger on it. I'll tell you what I didn't like about Scott's run was Gordon wearing a suit and being Batman.
Yeah, that did not work for me.
Yeah,
that whole story arc didn't work for me.
I agree. But what I did like that he did was the relationship with the Joker. And there's that, and also the idea that Scott cured Bruce's phobia. And we had a period where Bruce Wayne didn't need to be Batman and was actually living a nice, adjusted life. And there's that incredible scene on the park bench of Batman and the Joker and, Bruce and the Joker in, normal-looking skin, some sort of makeup to make him look normal. And he leans in, he's like, do you ever get the feeling that you're not really who you are and you should be something else? And Bruce is like, yeah. He goes, let me give you a little piece of advice. Don't listen to that voice. And it was screaming.
Yeah, that's a nice moment.
It really was.
When I read that arc, and it made me think of actually, I don't know if you remember this in Legends of the Dark Knight, was the Going Sane arc that J.M.
DeMatteis.
What is his name?
Yeah.
DeMatteis, he did, which is about the Joker who falls in love, and he's which is really Joe Staten, I believe, did the arc for that. So I thought of that when I was reading that.
Sure.
That's what it kind of made me think of.
Don't you get a feeling that this Scorsese Joker produced movie that's coming out with Joaquin Phoenix is stealing from Going Sane?
Yeah, maybe. I have people are going crazy on Twitter for it, talking about, I read people talking about like, this is going to win an Academy Award. And it's like, this is the damn teaser trailer. Look, it looks interesting, sure. But you know what? I'll wait to see the movie. Okay, I really don't know what to think of it.
Well,
really.
And it'll be interesting to see. Because the Venom movie had this same problem, and it didn't work. Can you do a movie about a villain without the counterbalance of the hero, to which, that they balance each other? Because I had that conversation with Dave Michelini as the Venom movie was premiering. I'm like, Dave, I got to be honest, I don't like Venom. I like him as a villain, but ever since Marvel decided in the early 90s, we've got a great anti-hero here, I'm not feeling it. And it's funny because I'm going to talk to Donny Cates in hopefully the next month or so. And I'm proud and I'm thrilled that he and Stegman are having such a great run on Venom. But I'm like, I don't know, man. Without Spider-Man, does Venom work? And the same thing with the Joker. Does it work without Batman?
Here's the thing with Batman and the Joker, and the way I look at it is the way there's a moment in Batman 251 and Five-Way Joker's Revenge where the Joker has O'Neill and Adams at like their best. And, the Joker has a moment where he can kill Batman. Batman's susceptible. He's unconscious, and he can just crush the life out of him and kill him. And he won't, because he can't exist without Batman. Yeah. And, that comes across in The Killing Joke. And yes. It's also, there's an emphasis on it in The Dark Knight and
yes.
in Nolan's film. Because that's the way it is. They can't exist without each other. That Batman, the creation of Batman, and the fact that he exists is the reason all of these insane rogue villains exist in Gotham City.
Yes.
And Miller, it's in Miller's work in The Dark Knight Returns and in Year One.
Yep.
And I think I feel it in Tom's work also.
Sure.
And also, and the same thing in Englehart, the same thing. That Joker could not exist without Batman.
I agree with all that. And mentioning Dark Knight Returns and that specific idea that the villains exist because of Batman, that first issue of Dark Knight Returns, they could have stopped there and it would have been an epic story, because that Two-Face interlude, and they did a good job translating it to the animated movie as well.
I agree. I like the animated movie.
Yeah, where they fix Harvey's face on the outside, and he can't help it. This is who he is. And it's that wonderful, scene in the comic and stuff. Take a real hard look, Bruce, and see who I really am. And he's like, I see a reflection, Harvey. And it's beautiful, and it really is. It's like I can't escape my fate. And also regarding the Batman Joker dynamic, I give it to Snyder again, because we talked about death in the family, his take on, and of course there was the original Starlin story that was the death of Jason Todd, but the one where Joker dies or Batman dies, I guess Batman dies, and he's like, the Joker's whole thing is he is performing for Batman, and he's like, don't you see I'm doing all this for you? All my sick jokes are because, don't you get it? And again, you mentioned Killing Joke. There's that wonderful scene at the end. It's sad that Alan Moore doesn't, kind of looks at it badly and stuff, because there's that incredible final scene where Bruce is just like, hey man, I can help you. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. And Joker, in a moment of sad, he's like, no, I appreciate it, but I can't not be who I am. And it's great, because it really is just like, tired, and I'm not going to try and kill you at this moment. It's like, no, man, I'm beyond
in
it.
the end, they share a laugh over this ridiculous joke about being crazy.
What do you think of that whole subtext thing that wasn't in? Didn't Bolin say that, as far as he's concerned, after they start laughing, that Bruce is choking him and killing him or whatever? Hence the killing joke.
Yeah, I don't know. I
love that. I love mysteries like that. It's the same thing with Gwen Stacy's neck breaking in the death of Gwen Stacy, and it's did Peter's web cause it, or was she already dead from the fall? Yeah.
Right.
And I'm like, come on, Jerry Conway, tell me.
Right.
Great stuff, man. No, and it's great. It's like, no, you want to leave things ambiguous, and Tom's had a couple good ambiguous moments as well in both. Certainly in Mr. Miracle. And what do you think of Heroes in Crisis? I'm enjoying it. It's,
Miss Hit.
Tell me what you think.
I love it. I love it. I think he's done something that you see in a lot of the great. I hope I'm not reaching here, but this is how I see it. The great film noir movies, where you've got this great film noir directors, where they've got a murder mystery or a private detective and there's something going on. But the driving force behind the story is this murder mystery. But there's more going on. There's subtext, and there's other things that are going on, important questions that are subtle, and it gets back to his how subtle his writing is. It's the kind of writing, great writing calls for you to read something more than once, and you want to read it more than once. And he's the one writer, along with Ed Brubaker right now, who's writing, I want to read more than once. I'm going to read that story. I'm going to put it away and read it again later.
I understand.
And I'm going to pick up more things. And Heroes in Crisis is the perfect example of that, because there's a lot more to it than, and I'm not talking about like Easter eggs and things like that. I'm talking about things that are going on, metaphors and symbolism that I think is going on in these stories, whether it's things about talking about psychological stuff or, dealing with post-traumatic stress, all kinds of stuff. That's what great writing is about. And that's why I think people like Tom, people like Brubaker, people like Chip Zdarsky. That kind of writing is in comics right now is like there's like a little bit of a golden age of writing, and Scott Snyder too.
Sure.
There's kind of a golden age of comic book writing right now. There's great stuff. Jeff Johns too. What he's doing in Doomsday Clock too is fantastic.
I agree with all of that. I think Bendis is doing a great job too on Superman. I think
yes.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to leave him.
Oh no,
out.
I'm only because you're right.
What he's done on Superman is fantastic. I'm loving all of it.
Yeah, no, it's a good time. And also, by the way, I'll give you another Marvel writer, Jason Aaron. Jason Aaron is that. I mean, God, especially that Thor run has been so rereadable, and the things he's done with Thor, I just never would have thought of, and I love the way he handled Jane Foster as Thor and the soft landing that he gave her. And also now I'm hearing that she's coming back and she'll be the new Valkyrie, which I think is a good stroke of she deserves to continue as an Asgardian
I'll
hero.
have to read that. I haven't. I have to be honest. I haven't read it.
Oh, it's great because also the artist that they've paired him with for the Thor run, it's really like if Thor was a heavy metal comic. And it really has that kind of beautiful art along with Jason's incredible story. And now,
That's great.
What I haven't read is Conan, and I'm hearing great things about him taking over on Conan.
I just picked up the first 4 issues of the Savage Sword of Conan, and I'm enjoying that. I'm so glad that Marvel's got Conan back. I think that's great. I'm very happy about that.
It's the same thing with Star Wars in that, and it's not to diminish what Dark Horse did with both properties, because I really think that Dark Horse doesn't get the credit it deserves for maintaining the Star Wars license for 20 years as it did. And really churning out a shit ton of really, really good Star Wars stories. But it seems that now the Lucas office is willing to do more stories about Luke, Han, and Leia and the directions they've gone in the Marvel books, as opposed to the new canon that they created in Dark Horse, going 1,000 years in the future, and great stories. Dark Empire. I mean, initially you had classic stories like Dark Empire and things like that were great sequels to the movies. But then they kind of got away from the core and had to do other things. And the same thing goes for Conan. They'd get great people writers and artists to do beautiful Conan stories. But it just seems like, all right, it's like, Conan's come home again to Marvel because of the Barry Windsor Smith, Roy Thomas years. So.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that I mean,
sure.
Barry Smith's work on that, and those guys in the studio, those were my heroes when I went to art school. I mean, those the guys at Jeff Jones and Bernie Wrightson and Barry Smith and Michael Cool, those guys.
Absolutely, man.
That was what I wanted to be. I looked at that and was like, I want to be in a studio with other artists like this. This is great. But so I'm very happy that Conan is back there. One other thing I wanted to just say about Batman run that Tom is on right now is that the art that he's getting is just phenomenal.
Yes.
I mean, the artists that he's getting, all of them have been incredible.
Mike Janine, Joel Jones, and Mitch Gerrits, of course, got in there, and Clay Mann. That's the immediate five.
Michael Janine and
yes. See, I said Janine, but Janine, you're probably right. That's probably the proper way to say it.
And also the Jorge Fornes.
Yes,
is that his name?
Oh my God!
Wow,
he's like Dave Mazzucchelli, isn't he? Jorge Fornes.
Yes,
that's what immediately my first thought when I saw his stuff. I'm like, man, you found the next Dave Mazzucchelli. This is amazing.
He's great. I don't know if I have to ask Tom if he's the one if he's asking for these artists specifically. I told him that. I said the art that you're getting is just fantastic. And I did pass on to Tom when the last couple of times. The last time we met, we hooked up. But even before that, when we were talking at Noir City, DC. He wanted recommendations for noir writers, and so I kind of hooked him up with Jim Thompson, who's my favorite.
Oh, that's
writer.
Great. Sure.
So he's got a bunch of my Jim Thompson novels right now that he's borrowing and reading.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific, man. See, and I'm
because
go ahead.
I just think I have no idea what he's going to do, but I'm not saying that he's a great comic book writer, but I think he's destined for even more.
Oh, no question. Well, he's
novels and screenwriting.
He's been public with the fact that he's been having Hollywood meetings, and
I know he was having. I know I know a little bit. I'm not going to say anything, but I know a little bit about it. But yeah, he's destined for some big stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh no,
he really
I agree.
is.
I absolutely agree. And God, we haven't even mentioned Sheriff of Babylon, how tremendous that's been.
Yeah.
And look forward to them getting back to that as well. No, it's incredible stuff, and I'm very, very happy for Tom. He's a good guy, and he's a talented writer. So no, this is tremendous. And again, I think with very trepidating expectations of, oh God, please, they're giving you Batman. I hope he's serious when he says he's got great ideas. And then it's like, holy shit, he does have great ideas. And it's been amazing. Did you hear the rumor that Idris Elba is going to, obviously, he's in the next Suicide Squad movie, and they said he's not going to be Deadshot. I really hope he's Bronze Tiger, because I think Idris Elba would be an excellent Bronze Tiger. I don't know if you had any thoughts on it.
I saw the original thing about him being Deadshot, and then that he was not. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything, but yeah, that would make sense.
I hope it happens. And again, I like the way Tom used the Suicide Squad in those early arcs of his Batman run. But no, I agree, man.
Yeah.
And also, Joelle Jones, she did a great job on that Batman Wonder Woman story, and also designing, obviously, the wedding dress, and I love what she's doing on Catwoman too.
I've enjoyed Catwoman a lot, and she's got. I mean, that's a lot to live up to, but
Sure.
with the whole run that Brubaker ran, so she's doing a great job with that and writing that, and it's nice to see that she'll be getting back to doing the art on that too. So.
Agreed. No, she's amazing, and it's I got you got to hand it to DC, because I really think that this is. Rucka always said that DC and Marvel are like the tortoise and the hare. And Marvel's the hare, and when you think the hare's got the race beat, all of a sudden here comes the tortoise. And they put it all together, and suddenly they're out lapping the hare and everything. And I mean, New 52, I appreciate the experimentation. There was a lot wrong with the New 52, and John.
You won't get an argument from me.
Yeah, John's with Rebirth on, and everything has really righted the ship, and I think they've had the right. Josh Williamson has done an amazing job on Flash. And now Grant's on Green Arrow or Green Lantern, but Vendetti.
That's a great book.
Oh yeah.
Boy. Oh man, Liam Sharp. Man.
Yes,
wow.
indeed.
He's amazing.
Oh yeah,
he's incredible.
Absolutely, man. No, there's good stuff happening.
He is a throwback. He is like this throwback. I look at his stuff and it's like I see Al Williamson and Wally Wood, and I see some Neil Adams in there. It's like, holy crap. I mean,
I'm with you.
It's all him. Now, it's all him. I'm not saying
I know what you mean.
He's not, but it's like, wow, I see all the influences there, and it's beautiful because it's his own, it's him and all of those influences, and you can see them in there, and it's some beautiful work.
I agree. It's like Chris Samnee's Alex Toth influence always comes through, but it is Samnee art. And, I'm looking at one of my favorite Samnee pieces right now. He did a Dan Dare, the British kind of Flash Gordon.
Yeah, Dan Dare, sure. I remember that.
I'm a massive fan, and I love, and this is great. He's in a pterodactyl's nest, a giant nest with these little hatchlings coming out, not realizing there's a giant pterodactyl about to attack him. It would have made a great Dan Dare cover, and I'm proud to say it's hanging on my wall. But that's great. Now I want to get into your EC work, and also I want to talk more Hollywood stuff with you. So while we're still in the comics, let's transition then to EC and the stuff you've done for the EC collection over the years.
Yeah. So I was. I got to know Russ Cochran when I guess Gemstone, who is the publishing arm of Diamond, they took over Comic Book Marketplace, and then eventually he became editor of Comic Book Marketplace. And I had been a subscriber to Comic Book Marketplace for a while, and I loved that magazine.
Me too.
And I honestly noticed when Russ took over, it had problems. It didn't look good. The design wasn't very good, I thought. And I thought he was out of his element because he was an EC guy, and he was a comic strip guy. He was an older guy, and I don't think he had much understanding or interest in Silver Age, Bronze Age, or modern comics. So I ended up writing him and saying, "Hey, look, at the time I was working on Monsters from the Vault magazine, which was a classic horror magazine that I founded with a friend. And we had been getting good press, and we were at conventions and stuff. And I said, I'm designing this right now. And I sent him the magazine. And I said, look, let me design your magazine. Let me redesign your magazine and work on your magazine. And he loved... I guess he was a classic horror fan, so he loved the magazine. Basically, the way I approached Monsters from the Vault was we had some of the top writers who were writing about classic horror movies, who had done books about it and so forth. And my approach was to design it to look like a very modern, sleek magazine. Instead of making it look like some retro thing or some fanzine, it's like, I'm going to make this look like the most, professional, sleek, slick, highly designed magazine. And so he liked it, and he said, yeah, let's do this. And what ended up happening was as we became friends and colleagues, he let me go ahead and kind of suggest to him like what he should cover, because he wasn't covering any modern or silver or Bronze Age comics. So anyways, that developed into a friendship, and I had the chance. It was very nice because I had the chance to work on these magazines and get to know a lot of people and interview a lot of great creators, Neil Adams and Will Eisner and Alex Ross and Bernie Wrightson. And anyways, he then asked me, he had the project that he was going to start the EC archives. Now, he had already done, and I was a big fan of EC Comics when I was a kid because of his library, the bound volumes that he did that were photographed from the original black and white original art, because, Russ was friends with William Gaines, and he was able to gain Gaines's trust and go into that vault and photograph all stuff. He was able to convince, Gaines, let's do this, and I'm going to reprint every single issue of EC Comics from pre-trend all the way to post-trend, and I'm going to photograph it from the original art. It's going to be black and white, and we're going to do color covers, and have Maurice Severin, do the coloring, hand color the original, the colors, the covers, and it's a phenomenal collection. I mean, I've got a complete set. And he said to me, he said, well, I'm going to be doing the EC archives, and it's going to be all in color. So my first thought was like, God, how many times can you reprint these EC Comics, Russ? But there was a calling for it. And what was nice was he let me design the books, and he also asked me to be in charge of the coloring of the books. So I handled that. So I dealt with the coloring and the colorists, which was kind of rough to begin with because the colorists that I was dealing with didn't really get it. It took a little time for them to really do it the way I wanted them to do it. But it was nice to be able to do the design work, and it actually did win a Harvey Award for book design.
That's outstanding.
But just being able to do those books and work with him on them, and he was able to get like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to write introductions to the books. And we got Al Feldstein involved, although Al Feldstein was not a fan of Russ Cochran.
Wow.
He did not like Russ.
Didn't know that. Amazing.
Oh no. Oh yeah. No, he felt Russ was a guy who was just out for the money, and he was just trying to exploit things. In fact, from what Russ told me, when he would go into the offices, into the Mad offices, and work with Gaines and doing the artwork, Al Feldstein was not happy about it.
Wow.
But he was able to get Al to actually be involved in one of these really nice book set that we ended up doing. We designed it as this clamshell book, like this beautiful clamshell covering, and this bound leather book with like in white, where I designed these covers that were montages of all these great, whether if it was a sci-fi, if it was weird science, of great weird science art, and then it was in this white leather, and we had the idea of like including in the book white gloves, so that you could read the book with the white gloves and never get anything on the white leather.
Oh, that's great. Hilarious.
Yeah, and it was like a limited edition. I think it was like 50, and Al Feldstein signed the 50 books
Holy
for
cow, that's
the Weird
wonderful.
Science edition.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I did see Al at one of my earliest conventions, pre-Word Balloon, and it's amazing. A guy that I knew that was a videographer videotaped this incredible interview with Al, and I've yet to see it hit the light of day. And I'm like, what are you waiting for?
Oh, that's too bad.
He's one of those guys. He's a good guy, but he's one of those guys that it's like, why is this still sitting in your collection and you haven't released it? I don't know what you're waiting for, and it's amazing. And to be honest, he was my original collaborator for Word Balloon. Word Balloon was going to be a video documentary thing, and he kind of flaked out on me. So I'm like, something, I'm going to take the audio and turn this into an audio podcast, and I've never looked back. 14 years later, it's like, well, all I can tell you is, man, I'm sitting on.
Good for you.
Well, I mean, no, it's just, I knew I had good content. I knew I couldn't let that shit, go away. And I know you're the kind of guy like that too. Again, you worked at Two Morrows. Did you know Chris Irving at all?
Yes. I knew Chris, very early on when Chris was actually an intern at Two Morrows, and he actually helped Michael and I with a little research on the Batcave Committee.
Oh, there you go. Well, Chris, I just had an interview with Chris, and they'll be out around the same time as each other in terms of your interviews and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's everything you've been talking about in terms of some of the interviews you got to do with creators and everything. That was Chris was doing the same stuff and doing it.
Didn't Chris do a book? That was photographs and interviews of creators.
Yes.
Didn't he?
Leaping Tall Buildings.
So that was really nice.
Yeah, very nice
book.
My good friend, the late Seth Kushner, who was an incredible New York photographer. That is a shame that when he passed away, because he was a great member of the comics community, both as a photographer and usually if you found a great picture of one of your favorite creators from the last 15 years, it was probably taken by Seth. And
those are great photographs. I can just the ones from that book.
Yes.
Were just incredible.
Absolutely. But yeah, Chris and I were talking about thank God we got to interview some of these people before they went away, and it's because I always fear that there is a rose-colored glass memory of this stuff that we've loved as kids, appreciating what came before. And you don't know the real story behind the creation of this stuff. And I always use the example of a lot of those Golden Age artists, as great as they were, and they were incredible, this was a paycheck, man. These guys
were working for their families. Right. These guys were working. This was their job. Yeah. They were showing up, and this was their job.
Yes.
If you read the first 3 issues of Criminal,
right,
it's all about that.
Right, exactly.
Ed's story is all about that.
I know, and I talked about it. It's like, okay, I think
phenomenal. Did you see that they're expanding Ed and Sean are expanding that into a graphic novel
Yes.
that's going to be coming out.
Yeah.
They're expanding the story. But one last thing
Sure.
about the EC, my favorite thing that I got to do was, and I love those bound volumes. And the one thing I couldn't wait for that I was waiting for Russ to do, and look, it took Russ, I don't know, like 25 years to get through everything. It took him forever
Did he
to
finish?
do all of it.
Did he finally finish?
He finally finished.
Oh, that's good for
and
him. Jeez.
I got to work on the last thing that he did, and this was the thing that I was so happy about that I got to do. Pictofiction,
Wow.
which was of course after the Kefauver hearings, and they destroyed EC Comics, and the Comics Code came out, and the Comics Code and all of the publishers, when you read, if you've ever read the Comics Code, it's almost like they were creating the Comics Code to destroy EC Comics
Absolutely.
and to get them out of business, because they were phenomenal, great sellers. They were, and also, Gaines and Feldstein had all the best artists too.
Yes.
So for the listeners who don't know what the Pictofiction was after the Comics Code came out and pretty much censored EC Comics, and they actually did come out with some EC Comics, which is called the Post-Trend Comics, which was like Aces High. I think they did that. I think they did Extra, Psychoanalysis, or Psychoanalyst, Extra, Valor. These were all kind
Valor
of
was the Knight in Shining Armor book.
correct.
Yes.
Right.
All the
Piracy.
post horror and crime stuff that basically, like you said, the Code kind of destroyed their ability to do those kinds of stories anymore.
Exactly. And Piracy was another
Yes.
one, which was all the pirate stuff, which I think that Alan Moore used as an influence as part of Watchmen.
Yes, Black Freighter
especially
stuff.
since Joe Orlando was actually one of the main artists on Piracy.
That's true.
But Pictofiction was kind of like the Gaines and Feldstein's answer to the fact that the Comics Code had come out. This was their way around the Comics Code. So basically what they did was they created, in a way, the graphic novel format, which was they created magazines so that these were not going to be comics, so they weren't under the code. They were black and white on the interior, color covers, black and white on the interior. They had all the great artists, Graham Ingalls, Wally Wood, Williamson, Joe Orlando, George Evans.
Wasn't Matt Baker and Arnold Drake's It Rhymes with Lust? Was that a Picto book or no?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I know. Go ahead.
The Picto books were Shock Illustrated, Crime Illustrated, Terror Illustrated, and Confessions Illustrated.
Okay.
And I think that each one lasted about 2 issues. And I think one of them had a 3rd issue that never even got published. But they're beautiful black and white art. And you had the artists that I mentioned, working in kind of an experimental form. Like some of them worked on Coquille board, and some of them did black and white washes. Some of them were working in Conte crayon. All kinds of great stuff. It's basically text and pictures. There's no word balloons, so it has almost like an illustrated book feel, but it's magazines, and it's comic book narrative, but with just words and pictures.
Kind of like Steranko's Chandler.
Very much like Chandler, yeah. And things like Crime Illustrated and Shock Illustrated is just pure noir. It's these great noir stories, and that was the stuff that was influencing Feldstein and Gaines, because of course the old story about how they came about about the ideas for their stories was that William Gaines, who had a weight problem, took Dexatrim. He was on speed to try to keep his weight down, and he had problems sleeping at night. He couldn't sleep. So what would he do at night? He would sit up and read. He read pulps. He read crime pulps, horror pulps, science fiction pulps. He read novels, crime novels, science fiction novels. And he would tell Feldstein the next day, they would meet and they would come up with these ideas, and Gaines would write down on index cards just kind of like phrases or just one word idea for something. And he would hand these things over to Feldstein, and Feldstein would create these stories. And those pictofiction stories, the terror stories are pure horror. A little noir mixed into them, but man, that stuff is great. And Russ asked me to go ahead and put those together for him.
Wow.
He gave me all the art, and he also gave me Marie Severin, painted the covers for these, and did I guess they were like alternate covers that they had of, I guess, art that Williamson had done and a few other people had done, and she painted she hand painted these, and Dr. Martin Dyes, and so I got to scan those. Wow. and come up and recreate the logos. And
was that some of Marie's last
design
work?
That. I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
The funny thing is, the way the archives actually came about was that Russ gave her a shock suspense story. I'm trying to remember which one. It's one of the Preachies that from Shock Suspense Story.
Okay.
I can't remember which one. And he gave her stats, and he asked her to color the whole thing, and he paid her to do it. Just go ahead and hand color the whole thing, and we published it in Comic Book Marketplace. And that's where he came up with the idea of doing the EC archives all in color, because of course, the EC library was all black and white,
yes.
except for Mad, which was actually done in black and white, and he also did the Mad, the original Feldstein comics in color.
Yep.
He did a color edition of that.
Yep.
And that's where he came up with the idea. And his original idea was, he said, "Well, Marie, we'll do the EC archives, and you'll hand paint and you'll hand color every page."
Oh my God.
She said to Russ, "Russ, I'm at the time, I'm 70 years old. I can't do this. Are you kidding?"
Oh man, every story I hear about her is just amazing, and I feel bad too that I didn't get a chance to ever talk to John, but I spoke to a couple, people that worked with John and stuff, and Scott Alley, the former Dark Horse editor. I'd always be like, "All right, tell me some John Severin stories," because he got to work with a few of John's final works. So, cool brother and sister of comics, Marie and John Severin.
Oh man, John Severin, man, his stuff. Oh, Cull. I remember Cull.
Yes,
I remember. I think that was the first John Severin art I ever saw. Was Cull #1.
Wow, he's I still have forgotten genius. No, absolutely, man. There's a classic name that it should be in the pantheon of the Wally Woods and everyone, and the critics in the know.
Oh, his war stories and
the
Two Fisted Tales and Frontline Combat are fantastic.
Agreed. No, it's and Brubaker's. I always love Ed's favorite EC creator is Johnny Craig, and
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. That's talk to Eddie Muller. I mean,
sure.
He's
Johnny
Craig is a god for Eddie, and rightfully so. Johnny Craig's crime suspense stories started out, all the books were edited by Feldstein, and he wrote all the stories. I mean, it's just unbelievable, phenomenal, but he couldn't keep up. And in the end, what ended up happening was that Johnny Craig took over crime suspense stories, and Johnny Craig wrote the stories, and he edited that book.
Makes sense.
In addition to doing the main art for the first story, the opening story for each issue.
Okay. Wow. No, I have great admiration for those EC guys, and I just barely missed talking to Al Williamson before he passed. And again, thankfully know enough of his friends that I, was able to get some sort of composite about Al and how generous he was to young artists, and what an incredible talent he was. But Feldstein and Craig and Wood and Will Elder, and I mean, it's so funny when Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner were doing Harley Quinn and doing the Harley Quinn comic as part of the New 52. I went up to Jimmy and I'm like, I know what you're doing. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, with Harley Quinn, man. And he goes, what? I go, that's your little Annie Fanny. And he went, shh. And I'm like, exactly, man. I go, being the same age as Jimmy, it's like, I know exactly what you're doing, man. And that's fantastic because that's exactly what comics needed. And much like Little Annie Fanny, Harley's the perfect, character to have that kind of point of view. And it's perfect. And it absolutely, and it's still original. But yeah, no, definitely. It's like, way to go, man. Because Will Elder is one of my favorite EC creators. That again, you got to be an artist appreciator to, get those guys. And a woman, Patty Farmer, has been writing these amazing histories of the Playboy empire, Playboy magazine empire. And she did the second volume. She did was a book called Playboy Laughs, and half of it was about the comedians that would play at the Playboy Club and the whole history of the Playboy Club, and the other half was about all the great comic illustrators that Playboy would get. And Hef, being such a huge comic book fan, he hired so many of these guys. And, of course, the classic example was hiring Kurtzman away from Mad to do, of all things, Trump Magazine.
Trump Magazine, yeah.
And then Dark Horse re-released Trump in the last couple of years. And we finally got to see that stuff, and that was really neat to see. But, it's interesting to see all those great artists that, went over to Playboy and did some incredible work. Jack Cole, certainly.
Yeah.
Plastic Man's creator, did some amazing work for Playboy. Yeah, great stuff, man.
Oh, yeah. No, they had great writers. They had the best writers. I mean, you're talking about some of the greatest novelists of all time were able to came in and wrote short stories for them. And they had some of the best illustrators, contemporary illustrators at that time, illustrating those stories, those short stories too. So you had this combination of great writing and great art. That's we don't have that anymore. Publishing we kind of miss that in publishing.
Well,
right
and
now.
That's why I'm glad you're doing the magazine work you are doing digitally with Noir City and Ringside Magazine, because you really, hey man, I'm saying this, and I'll praise your work. They're well designed magazines. They're beautifully, you get together great art, and it really represents both the noir films that you get and books and everything noir that you cover in Noir City. And boxing, Jesus, man, this is like the best stuff since Ring back in its heyday, when they would pay real artists to do beautiful paintings and illustrations inside the magazine.
Well, thanks. The whole idea behind Noir City with what Eddie set up and created was that it was all about writing. That he wanted the best writers. Originally when I started working for Eddie, it was a newsletter, and I had proposed to him, let's expand this into a full digital magazine instead of just like a 20-page or 15-page newsletter. Sure. Let's make this into a full color, full magazine. And he has gotten the best writers, and now people are seeking out, to come to Noir City Magazine to write for it, because it's and the writers are just phenomenal. Same thing, that I thought that I really wanted Ringside Seat to be, and all credit to Bill Detloff, who's the editor. Yep. He has, besides the fact that he's a phenomenal writer himself. Yep. He is an incredible editor, and he has found some great writers to work on the magazine. And that's what it comes down to. The core of it is that the writing is great. And when the writing is great, that inspires me as a designer. When I read these stories that, I want this to look great and I want it to look good. So Yeah, the whole idea behind Noir City and behind Ringside Seat is that it's quality writing and it's quality graphics. It would be great if we had the budget to be paper, to be able to have a printed magazine for both of these things. But look, a full color magazine these days, the printing costs are just ridiculous. And then thinking about how much it costs to ship and to distribute something, forget it.
I hear you. Well, and I know you released a Ringside Seat.
We did an annual book, yes. And again, I almost modeled everything that Ringside Seat is on what Eddie did with the Fillmore Foundation.
Makes sense.
I mean, he was my inspiration for the magazine. That business model that he set up with the Fillmore Foundation and with Noir City became the business model that I wanted for Ringside Seat, and they put out. We do a Noir City annual, and it sells out every year. That book sells out. I mean, I think it goes the back out of print issues or copies of the book go for like hundreds now.
That's great, man.
They're collector items. So yeah, I wanted to do the same thing with Ringside Seat and put out an annual, and probably be putting together the next one. We're coming up on our second year. Once we do, we're working on our 7th issue right now, and once we finish our 8th issue, that will be our second year I guess 2 years of publishing. So I'll start working on the
next annual.
Bill and I'll start working on the annual for the next one.
That's outstanding, man. No, I'm a huge fan. I love reading it. I again, coming from writing for Bert Sugar's Boxing Illustrated as I did. I felt fortunate to be part of that staff in a small way.
Oh yeah, what you did in Boxing Illustrated in that magazine. I love Boxing Illustrated.
There you go, man. No, it was great stuff, and you guys really, again, the graphics are incredible. I appreciate the reviews of great boxing bios that you guys do, and much like the paintings that you guys find to put in Ringside Seat, the photography too. The ancient photography, is that stuff hard to clear as far as getting the rights to printing that stuff, or how's it been doing that?
It's basically kind of like what we do with Noir City, which is and it was the same with the Batcave Companion, and it all comes down to it's as long as you're producing something and you're showing like a photo or an image and you're writing about, as long as you're not promoting something for money. So if that photograph is Ollie and Frazier and you're writing in the magazine about that particular photo, what's happening in that photograph, I'm trying to think of what
it's fair use, basically.
Fair use. It's the fair use.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's fair
okay.
use.
That's great. I'm glad that law exists because, Jesus, so many great pictures. The one of Basilio, I think, in the Tony DeMarco fight. And
that was that I showed that was on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I put that up on Twitter. That's a great photo,
my God.
Isn't it? It's like the greatest boxing photograph ever.
Could be. Absolutely, man. And I'm thinking too of Neil, and I forget his last name right now. The infamous picture of Ali and Sonny Liston in the.
Neil Leifer.
Yeah, Neil Leifer, exactly. The Lewiston, Maine rematch.
Amazing.
And, Ali standing over Liston. And the great thing is you see the shot of the crowd and everybody's got their mouths open. And between Ali's legs, there's a very young Larry Merchant, like freaking out.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
That's like finding a picture of like Gandalf when he's like a teenager or whatever.
I found this great for Eddie's story about his dad that he wrote in Ringside Seat.
Issue 2.
In issue 2 of Ringside Seat, I found this great photograph of I think it's DeMarco versus Carter, Jimmy Carter.
Sure.
At the Cow Palace.
Excellent.
I could be wrong. I know it's DeMarco. And I think it's DeMarco being knocked down, or anyways, it's at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and right there ringside is Eddie's dad.
That's great. That's wonderful. God, I wish I had hung on to some of my boxing photos. I dated a girl that would come with me to the fights and, either, photograph the action, and she'd photograph me talking to Roger Mayweather and Jorge Paez and other champs and contenders that would come through Chicago and sometimes fight, but more often than that, just kind of wave and sign autographs and stuff. I enjoyed my 16 years covering boxing. And again, that's why I kind of came back with the Big Bob podcast. But truly, man, Ringside Seat is such a feast for the eyes, as is Noir City. I can't recommend to people listening, if you know how much I love crime comics and good crime fiction on the screen, in the pages. Noir City, obviously, Eddie Mullen knows what he's doing. You know him from his, as I'm sure I mentioned in the intro for Mike, the Noir City stuff that he does for Turner Classic Movies on the weekends. He's
Noir Alley,
excuse me. Mm-hmm. I always get it wrong. But and certainly
it's one's a city, one's an alley. It's like it's all noir.
It's all noir,
right?
But also Eddie comes through too with the live shows. They'll be coming back to Chicago in the fall, and I think September or October.
No, actually, I think in August.
Oh, it is in August.
I think it's in August.
Oh shit! I hope it's not when I'm at Mohegan Sun for Terrificon around the time that Tom King is going to be at Mohegan Sun this year. So he and I will be in Connecticut having fun. But anyway, regardless, no, it's they're great. The magazines are incredible. And like I said, the art, the articles, all that stuff is just amazing shit. And I'm glad you're working on these things, man. And also your relationship with Back Issue too, really neat stuff.
Yeah,
And also you just did a book that I want to mention because hopefully I'll be talking to the author in the weeks ahead. But a very interesting Bela Lugosi book, and I want you to talk about that for a second.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Because the author is Gary Rhodes, and he wrote this particular book with Robert Guffey. It's Bela Lugosi and the Monogram 9, and basically Gary is one of the great film historians, and he's written a lot of books, and I've been thankful that I've been able to have this long relationship with him where I forgot how many books we've even done together, but we've done a lot of books on Bela Lugosi and about horror films. And he is like the preeminent expert on Bela Lugosi. And this book that is just released and it's now available on Amazon is about Lugosi's run at Monogram Pictures, which was a very low budget, low rent studio in the 1940s that produced some pretty cool stuff. Cheapy noirs, some great cheapy noirs. And
they had the Charlie Chan series for a while as well. After Fox's original run on the series, it shifted to Monogram.
Right, and so when none of the big studios would hire Lugosi, I mean, this is what he did, and some of these are really interesting, and so there's really great information from Gary and Robert about the production of these movies and some of the stuff behind the scenes, and also analyzing the films. But Gary has written other books that he and I worked on that I designed for him about Lugosi's life. Fascinating stuff about how the FBI followed him because of his political leanings. So there's great stuff whenever you get the chance. Whenever Gary is on and you can talk to him about. There's a lot of great and fascinating information about Lugosi and his relationship with Ed Wood. Sure. We did a book. He and I did a book. He was able to find, and this is with Tom Weaver also. It's another guy who's an old friend who's an expert on classic horror films, and he's done a lot of work for Fangoria. He used to be a regular writer for Fangoria magazine, and he's written a number of books, collected interview books. He's interviewed everybody, and as far as like classic horror and stuff, and television too, really. But this book was collecting the scripts that Wood had done that were intended for Lugosi after they had met, like, so things that they never even got to do. So some fascinating stuff. So I'm sure if whenever you get, you'll have a lot to talk about.
That's excellent, man. No, I appreciate that. And no, I am fascinated by the real stories about Lugosi. I'm sure. Do you listen to you? Have we talked about this? You must remember this. The Katrina.
Oh, I listened to that podcast. Yeah, that's a great podcast.
She's incredible.
In fact, we interview Karina in the new issue that I'm working on right now, that I'm designing right now.
That's fantastic.
Of the new issue of Noir City, and a lot of it is about Vince Keenan, who's the co-managing editor and is a good friend of Noir City magazine. He interviewed her, and the interview is mainly about her new book about Howard Hughes.
Oh, that's fantastic! Wow, that's great. No, she's an incredible first-person podcaster, and I really admire her storytelling ability. Pretty much, I mean, occasionally she'll have another voice come in and read quotes from a star or from a director, whatever her subject is. But it pretty much is her, and great choices in music, and she's a wonderful storyteller. And she does an incredible job. And I was going to say the Lugosi Karloff series that
was great. I listened to that. She did a great job on the Karloff Lugosi.
Absolutely.
And her thing on Charles Manson,
yes,
about Charles Manson and Hollywood was fantastic too. And I'm convinced that Quentin Tarantino had to have listened to that, and that had to be an influence on him, in doing.
Or even better, when FX did their first season of Feud, and they did Bette Davis and Joan Crawford.
That was good too.
Karina beat them to it and did an incredible, much more in depth and much more real.
Agreed.
I mean, I liked Feud. Feud was fun, but they took some artistic license here and there. And I know that Robert Aldrich's family was not happy with the way Alfred Molina's depiction, and not that it was Molina's fault. He was reading the script, but the way they wrote Aldrich and the way Molina played him, he was much more of a nutted kind of like, yes ma'am, yes miss.
Yeah, but Karina Longworth's series on the two of them was great. I really recommend anybody to go ahead and subscribe to that podcast or just listen to it. She's I don't think she's doing it anymore.
Did she quit?
I think she stopped.
Really? I kind of assumed she might have been on break to write.
She said in her last podcast that she doesn't know if she's coming back. She's not ending it necessarily, but she's so busy with other stuff going on.
I can appreciate that.
I think her Howard Hughes books is doing very well, and she's been I know she's been touring and doing a lot of interviews and stuff.
Wow, that's a great loss from a podcasting standpoint, and I can appreciate that because the kind of writing she would do for that show is so time consuming. And I've talked to you about this, off the air and stuff that. I mean, if I really had the time and also was a better manager of time, I would love to do a first-person narrative about boxing and about some of the great, shady stories about boxing. And certainly we know there's enough stuff to talk about and things. But I really think that, that would be terrific to make because it's so great. And, truly, she is my inspiration because she did it so well. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
She was terrific, but I mean, I don't think she's closed the door definitely, but I was a little disappointed when I heard. Yeah, it sounds like it's either she's not coming back to it or it's going to be a while before she comes back to it. But you should read her interview, really interesting interview about Hughes.
Looking forward to it.
In the upcoming issue. Speaking of boxing stories. Nigel Collins, of course, who is like
genius,
the guy who helped me get Ringside Seat off the ground. He and Eddie Muller are like the two people who helped me get it going. And then Bill kind of took the reins and ran with it. But Ringside Seat is going to do something with Nigel in book form.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful, man. Well, again, I want to talk to Nigel. I gotta refocus, man. Ever since the injury, I don't know what happened, and it's word balloon is like rolling out of bed, and I mean no disrespect to my guests or my listeners when I say that, but it is so part of my routine that it really is like, okay, who am I talking to this week? And I truly can't wait, and I think my enthusiasm still comes through. But John. It's a matter of like making time for everything, and I really I enjoy doing the Big Bout podcast, and I want to do more of it. Here's my confessional, Mike. But truly, man, you were very kind, and you opened the door and got me in touch with Bill Detloff. I loved my conversation with Bill, and Doug Fisher at Ring has been tremendous as well, and.
Oh, Doug's great. Doug's amazing. He's fantastic. He's a great guy.
I love the fact that you guys are such hardcore comic fans as well, because then we can talk about.
I think Doug is like he's a big Marvel.
Absolutely,
guy. He's a real big Marvel guy.
So I look forward to having you both back on the Big Bout podcast as well.
All right, John. Here's what was crazy at North City in DC. All right. Getting a picture with a convulsion. Here's like these worlds like crashing in on one another. You got Nigel Collins, Eddie Muller, Tom King, and me in one picture. It's like here's all these people at North City, DC. So it's like next time if you live in the DC area, you ought to come to North City.
It'd be my
DC
pleasure. Well,
to meet a lot of cool people.
I'll make an excuse and crash over at Tom's house and everything when it's in town. I'll have to do that. And I love DC. Actually, I got a buddy that's down in I forget, like Maryland or close enough to the DC area that I could probably like stay with him, so I can.
Well, I lived there over 20 years.
That's what it sounded like and everything, man. Yeah, because where are you? Unless you don't want to disclose where the Batcave is, I can appreciate that as well.
Where I am now?
What's your town?
Oh, we're in Chapel Hill.
That's right. Okay, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Hilarious. No, that's great, man. Listen, we've been talking forever, and I've enjoyed it. Have I wiped you out? Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Okay, good.
I'm fine. Always great talking to you. You just inject energy into everything. That's why you're such a great interview.
That's very kind,
You're
Mike.
the best.
I genuinely appreciate it, and truly, I love the work you do in all these fields.
Thank you.
And yeah, man, no, we need talented creatives like yourself to elevate what we have and the platforms we have to make great content. And that's why, man.
I just have fun. That's all.
But that's exactly, man. And that's the thing with Word Balloon for me. It's a blast doing it. So that's great. And it's, as I said to Chris Irving and a couple other recent guests and stuff, we are fellow travelers, and we appreciate the history that came before us. We're fascinated by it. We want to share it with our listeners and readers, and give them the same thrill that we get when we discover this stuff. So, as always, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and please come back. There's always more to talk about. We barely talked about boxing, and that's just because, really, I think I've been more disappointed than happy with some of the current product we've had from the end of 18 till where we are today, man. I mean, it's... I don't know. I mean,
I'll tell you, there's going to be an article about that in the new ringside seat.
Because they really, to wrap real fast. I mean, it really felt last year that the last couple of years, I'm like, God damn, boxing's good again. I'm going to start paying attention again. I'm going to do a podcast. I hadn't done it for years, for over 12 years. I hadn't really done anything in print or on the radio with boxing, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of intrigued again. And then, just like, you take back an old girlfriend and that you should have been paying more attention, and the same bullshit happens again, and you're like, why was that? This is why I stopped dating you. You're doing it to me again.
Yeah. Yep. And especially the news of just recently, the whole thing with the...
Baby Miller?
Yeah. It's just like,
here... If I may, again, this is just me singing, fuck that guy. I was not impressed with him. When they were promoting him as the next big heavyweight. And it's just like, really? I just see a fat guy that can hit. I'm not impressed with him. I really think anybody with condition can probably wear him down and knock his ass
out. I'm going to read Bill's tweet that he did today, because this kind of sums it up. And it's like what's coming up in ringside seat. He said, we were a couple of signatures away from a series of heavyweight matchups whose glamour would have rivaled those of almost any era. Then everything went to hell. In the next issue of Ringside Seat, our own Jason Langendorf, who's an excellent writer, examines what went wrong and what could have been.
Yes.
So, next issue of Ringside Seat.
Man, I'm telling you, I know Dougie and I talked about Fury and Wilder, and did you hear Wilder on Joe Rogan's podcast? Self-delusional.
I know he spoke about like killing Brazil. He said he might kill something along those lines. Look, I'm paraphrasing.
Okay,
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was talking about Brazil dying in the ring.
Oh, Jesus. Well, what bothered me was that the ridiculous thing of, Fury was down for more than 10 seconds, so therefore he should have been counted out. And I've heard Mike Tyson in his one-man show same thing. And it's like, shame on you guys. You're professionals. It is not 10 seconds. It's the count of a referee's 10. Of course not. And it's, we've got a shot clock. We have the technology. If they really wanted to make it 10 seconds, they could be Swiss timing precise. And
it's like the whole Tyson Douglas
exactly
thing, with Don King screaming about that Douglas was down more than 10 seconds.
What'd you think of the 30 for 30 about Douglas?
It was good. I like 30 for 30. It was good, but I think Eric Raskin, who's the columnist for Ringside Seat, he did an oral history for Playboy magazine.
Yes, I remember you
a while back. I think it was
either you or Bill told me about this. Go on, please. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it was like I think was it for the 15th anniversary or whatever. That's a great piece, and that's online. I think I've actually tweeted out the link to that. That's fantastic. He got everybody talking about that, and that's a really great all around history of that fight.
Sure.
The other thing that's really good is, and I think Eric spoke to the author, and I am trying to find it. It's the last great fight, which is actually the whole book is all about about Tyson Douglas, and it's about them leading up their lives before the fight, leading up to the fight itself, and then what happened to them after that fight.
That's excellent. That's amazing. Yeah, that's what I felt.
That's
go ahead.
That's a really great book. The thing about the 30 for 30, and I did like it. It was mainly Buster Douglas's story.
100%, Mike. I was going to say the same thing, and I have said the same thing on the Big Bout podcast. It was fine, but it was like covering a great Super Bowl and only talking about the winner. And it's like, no, man, it's a two-handed story. And I understand that Tyson didn't want to be filmed for a current perspective, but you certainly could have gotten the Tyson perspective from all the talking heads that did participate, and they had the archival footage. And it surprised me, and maybe Time Warner was more territorial about it, but one of the best things that HBO did while they were covering boxing was that Tyson Douglas aftermath. And you got brutally honest but completely delusional Don King and Mike Tyson after that fight. And it was great to have that documented. And that's what's missing today. My dear friend Chet Kopic, who just passed away yesterday, in fact, and I think I mentioned it.
Oh, I saw you mention that online.
Yeah, in my last conversation with him, and it's again something I'm putting up on Word Balloon. We talked about the Riddick Bowe Andrew Galata fights in New York and the riots that broke out afterwards, and he was there, and Chet was there, and Chet was there with Bert Sugar and who were the other Mike Wallace. And, great Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes, and he was a fight fan. And, thank God George Foreman and Chet could kind of protect Bert and Mike Wallace because things really got out of hand. And, these are two older gentlemen and stuff. It's like, hey, we don't want you guys to get hurt in the melee and everything. But, no, that's I don't know, man. It's, again, I guess it's for another day. But this, I don't like the product we're getting. I think streaming is too in-house in terms of its hype, and we're not getting we're getting mismatches both in the ring, and then also the coverage isn't more than just a PR thing, and that kind of disappoints me.
I'm a cord cutter, so I stream everything. I stream everything now, so I liked the idea of the DAZN, if they were going to go ahead and get all these fighters and get all these fights, and that Top Rank went over to ESPN.
Yeah, ESPN Plus. Yeah,
but here's the problem: we're still getting bad matches.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed. We're getting bad matches, and we're still getting the fucking pay-per-view.
I know.
I cannot tell you. I flushed down the toilet $75 to see the Garcia
Spence
fight, and it didn't need to be. Look, it didn't need to be pay-per-view, but on top of it, did it have to be $75? Couldn't it have been $25? Couldn't it have been less money than that? And then you got Terrence Crawford fighting this weekend against Amir Khan. And look, I like both those fighters. Amir Khan's a fucking warrior, man. He fights anybody. I give him credit. He will fight anybody and everybody. And Terrence Crawford, in my opinion, along with Lomachenko, are the two top fighters in the business today. I love watching Terrence Crawford fight. But man, $75 for that fight? I
agree with you.
Because we know what's going to happen.
Totally agree.
We know unless something freakish happens, Terrence Crawford is going to knock him out.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, again, Amir Khan is not the fighter he was 10 years ago, and Bud Crawford is.
And here's the other thing, John, and I know you'll agree with me about this. The example of the Spence Garcia, that undercard stunk.
Yes, sir.
That undercard, every single fight.
Yes,
sucked.
sir.
And it's a damn pay-per-view. These pay-per-views should have fantastic undercards. When you look at the undercards for other great fights of the past,
agreed.
They had these great undercards.
Yeah. Well, dude, you could say the same thing about the Wilder Fury undercard. That was a shit undercard.
Right.
And man, no, I agree. Yep. And also your point about pay-per-view, because look, we all know Vince McMahon's a piece of shit. But you got to give him credit that at least if you subscribe to the streaming of the WWE, they throw in the pay-per-views. And you're right. It's obnoxious that people who subscribe to ESPN Plus should have had access to Crawford Khan. And
I know. I have ESPN Plus.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, and it allowed me to see the Lomachenko fight, which is fine. I mean, it's worth it to have ESPN Plus for the extra baseball games I get to see and the extra fights I get to see, and the fact that I got to see Lomachenko fight, even though it was a mismatch. But I mean, anytime you get to see somebody like that fight and you get to see a spectacular knockout, it's great. Okay. But absolutely, Crawford and Amir Khan should be on ESPN Plus. No or it should be even better. It should be on ESPN.
Absolutely,
it's gonna get this gigantic audience.
No, I agree, and that's what's disappointing, because at the beginning of the new Top Rank ESPN relationship, they were front loading really great fights on Fridays and Saturday nights on ESPN, and we were getting the best fight. I mean, certainly better than the product HBO was giving us in its final months. And also I like Dan Rathel's Boxing Beat show, which I think, while it lacked any bells and whistles, was at least an earnest show where, it could be bare bones. But, Dan's been doing a great job covering boxing since the 90s. And I have tremendous respect for him as a journalist. And I got to be honest, I'm not the biggest Max Kellerman fan. And also how that's been preempted now that Max signed with Top Rank. More times than not, that Friday show gets preempted. And we don't get to see.
Yeah, I think he's doing it this Friday. It's coming back. I think his Friday show has been pretty good. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I won't deny it. It's a personal thing with Max where he's more bluster than facts. And good Lord, and you and I didn't talk about it, but his Triple G Canelo predestined play-by-play patter of Well, Canelo.
That was Nigel wrote about
yes,
that.
and I know I think Bill.
Yeah, Nigel wrote a great article in Ringside Seat about that.
Absolutely, he's winning the story, but he's not winning. Is he winning the fight? And it's like, fuck you. Watch what's in front of you and shut the fuck up, Tim McCarver. And that's the thing. I just think Max smacks of what we used to call in sports radio Tim McCarver disease. Where, you had to kind of... Now, you understand that when we say it's a full count, it's 3 balls and 2 strikes. And it's like, really, the 4-year-old is telling you to go fuck yourself and knows just as much as you do. Oh, it's so annoying. And I mean, and that's the thing. Max, a lot of times on these cards, I like Mark Kriegel a lot. I think, and I love Tim.
I like Mark. I like him too, and he's a really nice guy. He actually was nice enough to let us publish a chapter from his book on Boom Boom Mancini and the previous issue, like
absolutely
the 6. Yeah.
No, and you're right, so, and really, oh God, now I'm blanking. The former junior welterweight that is one of the play-by-play. Well, first of all, I love Paulie Magliani, and he's at least earnest. And that's what I like, is he's not afraid. And I mean, he shows up on when they let Kriegel do like a panel show. But Tim, who am I thinking of? The guy who fought he fought Pacquiao.
Tim Bradley. Yeah. Tim Bradley's gotten much better.
I think I think for being a former fighter that's now doing color commentary, I think he's better than Roy Jones. I think I think it's an earnest guy that like is telling you what he sees and talking about the strategy that he knows, and is just a smart dude. I liked him a lot. So that's the thing. I like most of the ESPN reporters. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed with the way Plus started, and now it's more about MMA, it seems, than it is boxing.
I just
I like the groan.
and I'm not an MMA fan.
No, I mean, okay. It's okay. I feel the same way, buddy. No, it's just
I don't like
it's just not my thing. I feel the same way.
There will never be any MMA stuff in Ringside Seat magazine as long as I'm alive.
Good to know. And I mean, truly, I've tried a few times, and I've gone to a few live events, and Bellator's offices are based here in Chicago, so I would certainly have access to one of the main leagues, but I'm just not feeling it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm too old school a guy, I guess.
I quite agree. Well, I will be hitting you up more for more Ringside Seat contributors. And again, thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would be great.
My pleasure.
That would be great, John.
Dude, my pleasure. Truly, like I said, I love what you guys are doing, and I wanna be a part of it. And truly, as you noticed with Big Bout Podcast, I lean more on history than I do current fights because again, the current product can sometimes just disappoint you. And that's why I love Ringside.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's unfortunate.
Well, there's great history to talk about and re-examine, and overlooked champions and overlooked contenders and dream matchups and great biographies of fighters to cover. So this is good. This is reinvigorating my love and hope for the Big Bout Podcast in this conversation with Mike.
Good,
Kronenberg.
do it.
Absolutely,
do it. I love that podcast. So you got to keep
Thanks,
going,
man. Well, you keep going with Ringside Seat and Noir City, and also the great work you do for Back Issue and all the great graphic design projects of Michael Kronenberg. Thank you, man.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Mike Kronenberg on today's Word Balloon. I hope you enjoyed it. It was brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Again, this Saturday, Free Comic Book Day. I hope you have a good one. I probably will be at Chicago Comics because that's my closest store for Free Comic Book Day. I may or may not be at Oh Yeah Comics in Skokie. I suggest you go down there and check out Scoot and Art Baltazar. They're going to be doing some great signings. But regardless, when you go to Free Comic Book Day, make sure you pick up Aftershock Comics entry, and that's an issue of Animosity from Marguerite Bennett. A great Aftershock series, really represents the entire line in terms of interesting ideas, great genre-smashing concepts, great stuff. We just talked to Stephanie Phillips earlier this week, the writer of Descendant, another great Aftershock series that just started this week. You may want to pick that up when you're picking up your free comic books as well. But great stuff from Aftershock, from some of my favorite writers like Frank Gieri and Cullen Bunn and Tim Seeley and Phil Hester, Ryan Parrott, Good stuff, man. I'm telling you. Excellent stuff. Garth Ennis does a few series for Aftershock. They've got wonderful artists as well. I mentioned it earlier. The Art of Jim Starlin has been reprinted by Aftershock and is available there. And again, with that Avengers Endgame on our mind and Thanos, you can't get enough Thanos. Go to Thanos' own daddy that was there in Avengers Endgame. No spoilers yet, but you might be able to pick him out if you know what Jim Starlin looks like. So The Art of Jim Starlin from Aftershock as well. Really great books at great prices and really great ideas from great creators. Check it out. Go to their website. You'll find preview art, full story descriptions, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. More great stuff coming today. We've also got a great conversation with Mark Laming talking about his wonderful Star Wars art, his comics career in general, and also, I can't help it. When I talk to a British guy, I got to start talking about my favorite British television shows. And Mark and I are close enough in the same age that we like the same reruns and grew up with the same kind of shows, even though we were separated by the Atlantic Ocean. It's true. Mark Laming talking Star Wars and more on today's Word Balloon. And then also, Chip Zdarsky joins us. Chip is just doing so many great books at Marvel right now, between Spider-Man Life Story, which is a fascinating decade-by-decade look at Spider-Man, a great alternate history. Also, the Invaders book, which I'm absolutely loving. Him and Butch Geist just totally killing it on that book. A great Namor story that's wrapping up. And also, of course, beautiful work on Daredevil as well. I'm so happy for Chip. He's a great artist. He's a great writer, and I'm glad that he's found a good niche at Marvel and is telling some of the best stories that Marvel's putting out right now. 3 books that deserve your attention. Chip Zdarsky, also today on Word Balloon. Check it out. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you again in just a couple days with another batch of Word Balloon podcasts. I've been embarrassed by the amount of riches of interviews that I've been able to have lately, and I can't wait to share more with you. There's going to be a jam-packed May, which is perfect because May is Word Balloon's 14th anniversary. Unbelievable. May 10th. That is the day when Word Balloon turns 14. And I want to thank you, and one way I can thank you is bringing you more great conversation right here at WordBalloon.com. Until then, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.